Chapter 4. Ding! I'm going to do 2 today. Chapter 4 of this book is titled Biology. He defines a biological races as one who is expressing the idea that the races are meaningfully different in their biology and that these differences create a hierarchy of value. I think most of the time we understand what meaningful different in their biology. Most of you believe it. 2020. I mean, every comedian in America, that's basically their whole act. Especially the black ones. Black people do this. White people do this because they're white. Black people do this because they're white. Such and such. I mean, that's basically been American comedy for almost 200 years. It's very intellectually lazy, but it works, so why not? But I want to talk about this creating a hierarchy of value because he states in the book something that's very, very profound. He says, the person that creates the hierarchy always puts themselves on top. I say that about people that have religions too, like okay, I'm a whatever, a double Muslim. Richard Pryor, listen to that if you've never heard it. I'm a double Muslim. So God always loves the double Muslims more than everybody else. I always, anytime when I used to talk to religious people, they just ignore me now. But how is it that your group is always the one that's right? Until you leave that group, then they was wrong. This is the truth. Like, I don't understand why we don't see that, It took me almost 20 years to figure it out, as a young person. Like, okay, I can go to this church, we're the ones, and God loves us, and God don't like nobody else. And then you go to church down the street, yeah, because we're the ones, and God don't like us. And that's like, okay. Send your money. Okay, I see. But they both said send your money, so I said, okay, well that brings them together. But when we talk about biological racism, I think most people can decipher what biological racism is. Blacks are good at basketball, blah blah blah. I mean, just old and tired stuff. I think when you get to a certain age, you just really get tired of it, But if you start looking at like pop culture, it's the same old stuff. I think that's why when you get to a certain age, you like just start leaving certain stuff alone because all they do is recycle the stuff every 20 years, Same old stereotypes, It's actually pretty boring after a while, but he talks about a teacher of his. He can't remember her name, but she was white. She exhibited racist behavior. And he says, people of color sometimes cope with abuse from individual whites by hiding those individuals behind the generalized banner of whiteness. She acted that way, we say, because she is white. Or vice versa, black. Like I say, it's intellectually laziness. If some guy does or something, we say, okay, that individual is bad, not those individuals. He's like that because he's part of that group, And even myself, I do it with the church folks, Not all church folks are, assholes. Just some are. The ones. I was one, but not all of them. Some of them are just and kind and blah, blah, blah. So, it's just painting people under that brush, So he talks about an incident in his class where there was a little girl, a black girl. She raised her hand and the teacher ignored her for a student. He felt that the teachers were favoring the white kids. Now, I've never, had this problem because I always went to segregated schools where they were all black. We may have had like one white guy in the class, and he was like very, very poor or something, So I don't know. I've heard instances where kids go to integrated schools and get segregated against, get treated wrongly or poorly. And all of my teachers mostly were African Americans from what I remember. So, I was born in a very segregated society. Now, this is in the 90s. Now, I'm not that old. This was in the 90s, but I actually grew up and lived. I mean, even to this day, I live in a segregated world. So, I don't know, if that's the case or not. I remember sometimes you would have just bad students, and they would say, the teacher don't like me, so I can't really vouch for it, So you would have to talk to somebody that was raised in that area. But he talks about how she ignored the little girl who put her hands up and for another white student. And he calls this microaggressions. And this is where I wanted to go. A white woman grabs her purse when a black person sits next to her. The seat next to a black person stays empty on a crowded bus. Now, I experienced that, but I'm an introvert, so I liked it. A white woman calls the cops at the sight of black people barbecuing in the park. That bitch needed some dick. White people telling us that our firmness is anger or that our practice talents are natural. Mistaking us for the only other black people around. I hate that. When you go somewhere and it's like mostly a lot of white people or mostly white people, and there's like one other black family or whatever, and they all think y'all together. Or if you go somewhere that's a predominantly white, and then there's another black guy, oh, that's your boy, go call your boy. Like, I don't even know him, It's like, they do it, assuming we are the help. Assuming the help isn't brilliant, asking us questions about the entire black race, not giving us the benefits of the doubt. Well, other black people don't give other black people the benefit of the doubt either. So, calling the cops on us for running down the street. Now, I tell people all the time, I love to run, I love to jog, and even after this whole Ahmad thing, and I'll tell my son, don't ever get you a treadmill. Don't ever run on the streets after dark. I'm sorry. I don't care. I would never do that in my life. I could care less, whatever. Do not, as a black man, ever go jogging and go running before sunrise or after sunset. And that is a tip. I don't care. Y'all can say what it's supposed to be. Because I'm not even talking about from white people or police. It's other black people that'll look at you and be wondering what's wrong. You know what I mean? And y'all need to stop that with that hypocrisy and that bullshit. Always talking about how white people are discriminating against you, when most of the time it's black people discriminating against other blacks. The most racist people I've ever met is black women. Okay, back to the book. What other people call racial microaggressions, I call racist abuse. And I call the zero tolerance policies preventing and punishing these abusers what they are: anti-racist. Only racists shy away from the R word. Racism is steeped in denial. Because he talks about how people call it microaggression or stereotypes, implicit bias, and and tribalism. And this is his justification for what I talked about in another video, I think chapter 1, where where he instead of saying prejudice, because we had all kind of different words that we would call it prejudice, but they just called the whole thing is racist because it's steeped, and I can understand that. But we would call it racial bias, and no, it's all racism. So if you ever go on Twitter or something, you got to understand they don't categorize it. They call it the whole thing racist, which I don't know. I could dig it, I guess. But I think there's an extent to it. I think when you call it implicit bias and racism, it's not like I'm trying to do it. That's like even what I just talked about with black people. Like sometimes it's just natural from living in a society, how they cast black men or black women or whatever. I mean, I'm just as guilty of it, because sometimes if I might see a white woman in certain positions, I see a black woman, I'm gonna see different. So it works. And he explains that in the book, how we can be an anti-racist one minute and then a racist the next minute. It's a constant fight. That's why we have to discuss this stuff. That's why we don't have time. That's why I tell people we don't have time for parties. I mean, man. Christmas, Thanksgiving, the parties every week. I'm just not down with that. Every Friday night going to the club. No, see, every Friday night black people should be somewhere sitting down discussing this stuff. Not at the club, and come on. Oh well. So, the author, he goes into, his childhood, and he talks about this event, how he was actually, he went to chapel and he would not leave, because of what happened to his classmate. And, he says instead of the teacher, seeing him as a hurt child, they just saw him as defiant. And it happens, but I still don't see how you could do that as racial. That might just be an insensitive teacher, that wouldn't care, so I don't know, like I said, because I don't think just because a black person is a teacher, if they haven't been trained and they don't have the heart for that, they could use that same line of thing, So he talks about the black child being treated like an adult, and black adults are ill-treated like children, which is ridiculous, which is true, So he talks about him going to the principal offices, He talks about, his parents coming and basically telling him if you're going to protest, you're going to have to face the consequences of it, He actually had good parents that didn't punish him because he stood up for what he believed in, and not what they believed in. So, I think I'm going to be that same way with my child, So, biological racists or segregationists. Biological racism rests on two ideas: that the races are meaningfully different in their biology, and that these differences create a hierarchy of value. I grew up believing the first idea of biological racial difference. I grew up disbelieving the second idea of biological racial hierarchy, which conflicted with the biblical creation story I learned from religious study, in which all humans descend from Adam and Eve. It also conflicted with the secular creed I'd been taught, the American creation story, that all men are created equal. And he goes in talking about some of the books he's read. I'm telling you, you should definitely read this chapter if you're into studying. He talks about how sociologists, and that's another thing about like science, and you got all these people talking about science now and climate change, and you don't believe science. Science told us that we were half human. So don't tell me about no science, man. Because science change every 10 years. I love all these people on here. I saw an episode of Blackish, and they were talking about climate change. It's science. Like, okay. This is what science said. I grew up hearing about how black people had more natural physical ability. How black blood differed from white blood. All this was science. How one drop of Negro blood makes a Negro and puts out the light of intellect, as wrote Thomas Dixon in The Leopard Spots, 1902. How the increase of rape of white women stems from the large size of the Negro's penis and their birthright of sexual madness and access, as a doctor wrote in the 1903 issue of Medicine. Don't tell me about no science. He also talked about how in 1988 the American Heart Association said that black people have high hypertension rates because only those able to retain high levels of salt survive consuming the salt water of the Atlantic Ocean during the Middle Passage. This is your science. So And he also goes into to the Bible, and I don't know if you guys know anything about the curse of Ham. You know, I know a lot about the Bible because I was forced to read it and study it for about 20 years of my childhood. So, you know, I'm not as versed as I was. You know, not that I refuse to read it. I think it's a great, but I think it's a great work of literature. But I'm into other stuff. But I said that next year I was gonna really start reading the Bible again. You know, like maybe a book at a time. But there's this thing in the book of Genesis, the curse of Ham, where Noah, Noah from the flood, and his son, he got drunk, and his son saw him naked, Ham, and because of that, they said that your descendants will always be cursed and will be servants, and it's in the Bible. And they said that, the black race was Ham. So therefore, that's why the black race is always going to be enslaved, always not as smart, Come on, you Bible thumpers. But then the Bible thumpers, I say, well, that was the Old Testament, but racist people, scientists said that, that was why, they use it to justify slavery, like they did many other parts of the Bible. And this is, like I say, you can read on about what he talks about it, but I have to say about it, like, we're coming to a term right now in the year 2020 where, the black people are at a crossroads, I think. Are we gonna let the Bible, are we gonna let it hinder us like we've been doing for the past couple of 100 years? Are we gonna start taking stuff literally? Or are we gonna say no? If that says that I'm not what I'm supposed to be, then that's wrong. Anyway, so, and next he goes into talking about the Human Genome Project and how we all found out that race is a genetic mirage, that the ethnic groups of Western Africa are more genetically similar to ethnic groups in Western Europe and to ethnic groups in Eastern Africa. And it proved, like most of us know, that 99.9 we are 99.9 genetically alike. So, but he also, and I agree with him, he also goes into saying that singular race markers push for the end of categorizing and identifying by race. They wag their fingers at people like me identifying as black, but the unfortunate truth is that their well-meaning post-racial strategy makes no sense in our racist world. Race is a mirage, but one that humanity has organized itself around in very real ways. Imagining a way the existence of races in a racist world is as conserving and harmful as imagining a way classes in a capitalistic world. It allows the ruling races and classes to keep on ruling. Every once in a while you meet a little smart ass, and that's what they say. Well, race is a social construct. I don't know why smart asses always talk like that. I guess to smell their own breath. But race is not real. It's not real. But you live in a society where it is. So you running from reality again. You need to go get you some weed or a drink or something and just be honest, and you running away from reality again. That's what you're doing with that BS. To be anti-racist is to recognize that there is no such thing as white blood or black diseases or natural Latino athleticism. To be anti-racist is also to recognize the living, breathing reality of this racial mirage, which makes our skin colors more meaningful than our individuality. To be anti-racist is to focus on ending the racism that shapes the mirages, not to ignore the mirages that shapes people's lives. To be an anti-racist is to focus on ending the racism that shapes the mirages, not to ignore the mirages that shapes people's lives. Guys, have a great day.